Welcome to the 64 Squares studio, where chess history comes to life, one classical battle at the time. Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day and welcome back to Decoding the Fischer series. And today we are again covering a Fischer's game, of course, but it's 1956, not 1955. 1955, we saw that Fischer played in USA Junior Championship where he did not perform well, and this is 1956. Fischer is playing USA Amateur Championship, and this is game number 5. I will cover some more games from this tournament, but this is game number 5. It's been a year, so let's see how Fischer is performing now. So Fischer is white, and his opponent is Nash Edmund. So, well, I do not have much information on Nash Edmund, but he did play a pretty solid game in this game. So, I mean, you will see what I mean by that. So, Fischer started with knight f3, which is a surprise, right? Fischer last year was playing e4 on pretty much every game, but he did transpose one game to knight f3 and where he played King's Indian. So, let's see what his strategy is for this game. And we have knight to f6 by Nash Edmund. g3, do you see? So far symmetrical, castles by white, castles by black. And there you have a lot of options here. You can play c4 to transpose to English. You can play d4, so you can play the Catalan. And you can play d3 to keep it flexible. So you can play e4 and c4 later on. And Fischer played d3. And most likely he's going for King's Indian. And as white did not play d5 or c4 or d4, black played d5 himself. The best way to counter. And again, knight to c6, knight bd2, knight to c3 and knight bd2 are main option. Knight b2, d2 was played. Now bishop to g4 by black. And this is a rare move. c5 here is most often played. Idea is now you are basically playing playing King's Indian defense, and while black is playing basically the Fianchetto variation of King's Indian. Tempo down, of course. There you have your own trumps while being a tempo down. But bishop to g4, which is, it is a move, but it's not a challenging move because Fischer just played pawn to h3. And you never want to give up this bishop because after, let's say, simple knight recapture, and I can even play c4 for, just open the position for my two bishops. And white definitely holds a tiny bit of an advantage, even though it is more equal. It is pretty equal. Black will put all the pawns on the light squares. But yeah, as with a bishop pair, you can ask for some advantage. But after h3, of course, you would not take the knight. You will go back. Bishop to f5 being the most popular move. Bishop to e6 is a close second. And bishop to c8 is also played. And bishop to d7, which was played in our game, is a new move according to my database for 1956. So it was in this position that we have a completely new game. But after this game was played, a Grandmaster Shabalov would repeat this position in 1994 as a black. So very interesting stuff. But anyways, Fischer continued with e4, of course. Any King's Indian player would consider e4 as the main move, not the c4. And queen c8, that's the idea of this bishop being out and provoking this pawn to h3. So you can directly attack it. Okay, and king to h2 by Fischer, very automatic move. But here maybe e5 would give white a good advantage. And then you play king h2. But okay, king h2 by Fischer, which allows black to take d takes e4, which was played in the game. As I was talking about the Shabalov game. Actually, the Shabalov played rook d8 in that game, and after queen e2, e6, and he somehow able to outperform his opponent, even though he was worse for the entire game. So it is very interesting because Nash Edmund played the best move after king h2, which is d takes e4. So, well, a good move by black. D takes e4 and now rook d8, and this makes a whole lot sense now because this queen is lacking. You have to move the queen, right? There are some tactics which may followed on the d file because of the pin, so you have to move the queen. So queen to e2 played in the game, and Okay, knight to c6 being the, well, most obvious move. Knight to a6 was played. This is also makes sense because this knight maybe wants to go to c5, right? And a very strange move by Fischer, rook to e1. Maybe freeing the f1 square for the knight, but still a very strange move. You could play pawn to e5, you can play pawn to c3, so like it is a strange move. So rook to e1. And okay, knight to b4. Idea being if you play c3, the knight comes to c2 and it forks two rooks, directly taking advantage of the rook being on e1. But of course, Fischer would just move the knight and the queen defends it. And the c3 is coming in and you cannot defend against c3. You have no good squares for this knight. You have to go back. So Nash Edmund just played pawn to a5. So once the c3 is played, which you have to play, and Fischer played it, knight goes back to c6. And there is a threat of pawn to a4, right? To, get some space on the queen side. A very nice idea. Or maybe just, play pawn to a4, pawn to a3 and just weaken the c3 pawn, get the bishop open. And Fischer played knight to c5. Now this is a little bit weak. You have to play, let's say, pawn to e5, gain more space. And after knight d5, just play pawn to a4. Stop that pawn on a5. Do not let it come to a4. And white is actually enjoying a very nice advantage here because white has a very strong pawn on e5, which is well defended. White has more space. There is a c5 square, there's a d5 square for, c5 and d4 square for the knight. And yeah, white is definitely tiny bit better here. But Fischer played knight to c5 directly. After knight to c6, Fischer played knight to c5. Now, the bishop is under attack, even though, it's not like it is doing anything. You can give it up for a knight. You can play pawn to a4 and just give it up, which is the best move. But after knight to c5, understandably, Nash Edmund played bishop to e8, just defending the bishop. And you will kick this knight out with a following plan, which he will execute. It's actually a very nice plan. It actually stops pawn to e5, but Fischer played pawn to e5. And this is the idea, knight to d7. Now the e5 pawn is under attack and the knight on c5 is under attack. So it's not like you can play pawn to e6 because you will just lose the knight, right? And if you play knight takes g7, then after, well, bishop recaptures. And now this bishop got the f5 and the e6 very stable squares. And this pawn is still coming to a3. So black enjoys a nice, that knight exchange will favor black a lot. So Fischer understandably went back knight d3. It's not like black is equalized here. White is still better because there is a pawn on e5. And black played knight to f8. A very nice move. Idea being you will redeploy the knight or the bishop on e6 square. And you are just waiting to see what white will play. Actually, it is you are hoping that white play bishop f4 and then you play knight e6. But it is the best move. You can play it. My personal best would be pawn to a4 because idea is, let's say you redevelop the bishop. Then I go knight c5 back. And if you try to, flee with your bishop, with, let's say, not bishop to f5, then I got knight h4 and I hunt down this bishop. And then I have bishop pair and I can claim some advantage here. But that's what we play nowadays. But Fischer actually found a very faulty idea, but it is very interesting why it is a faulty idea. Fischer played pawn to h4 and it looks like it's quite a good move, right? You are threatening bishop h3 maybe, and you are also threatening h5, h6, and just attack on a alpha 0 style at 1956. A very ambitious idea. It does not work. And this is why it does not work, because Nash played bishop d7 and these light squares are quite weak. But you may ask, well, the pawn on s6 would have some impact on the king side, right? So Fischer played h5. You said A, you have to say B. And this is a mistake. You have to keep your king also safe, right? Your king is more open than black. And Nash played bishop to g4. And suddenly the pawn is hanging. And if you exchange here, it just does not make sense. So after bishop g4, what you can do is s6, which was played by Fischer. And simple bishop to h8 with a devious threat in the position. which Fischer fall for. Here you have to play. There is one move and the one move only which white can play, which is queen to a3, and that's such an odd move. So I mean, it just feels very odd to put your queen right in front of your bishop, right? But that's the only move you can play in this position, and the position is equal. But Fischer played the most obvious move in this position, which is bishop to f4, and this is a blunder. Why? Because now the queens came out to f5 with a direct threat on the knight. But Fischer said, okay, I will just move the knight. If the knight is attacked, I'm gonna move it, and I have the threat on b7. I may come back to e4. I may even play e6. Who knows? But there is a problem with this entire setup. So pause the video and try to find the move which Fischer missed and which Almond played, which wins a piece in this position, while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay. Well, the move in question is quite easy to, it is very missable. Black played pawn to g5, and that's it. You are losing a piece. In the game, bishop takes g5 was played, but let's say you move the bishop back. It doesn't matter where you move it. Let's say bishop c1. There comes knight takes e5. The knight is pinned to the queen, and the bishop defends the knight, so you cannot really capture it. And after this knight is under attack 3 times now, and it is defended only twice. So you are going to lose that knight because you cannot add the defenders. That's the main idea. And that's it. You just resign. After g5 you can resign actually. But Fischer played bishop takes g5. He gives up a piece. Well, if you don't know how you win a piece here, I can give you a couple of seconds. Well, it's simple. The knight is the only defender the bishop has, right? You just remove the knight with the attack on the queen first. And after the piece is recaptured, now you capture the free piece, which is not defended anymore. And okay, you are just down a piece right now as white. But black king is tiny bit open, I think. That there is no g pawn. There is a very strong h pawn, even though you cannot really defend the h6 pawn right now. Fischer played a very ambitious, the moves which will follow now is a very ambitious trap by Fischer. It shows how difficult it was to beat the Fischer that time. Played e6. It sacrificed the knight on c5, but there is some ideas. If you, let's say, capture on c5, I capture on f7, and let's say I play bishop h5 check. And let's say you blunder with knight g6, then there is queen e6 check, and already it feels like black king is getting hunted here, right? Knight is hanging. There is some rook e3, rook f3 ideas, and it is still winning, but you have to be very, very careful to win this position. So after pawn to e6, a very interesting idea by Fischer. Well, Nash played a very calm move, queen takes s6 check. Well, first remove that poison pawn from s6 square. King goes to h2, but it opens the h file, right? And there comes knight takes e6. Remove the second pawn off. Idea being, if you play knight takes e6, then I just play queen takes e6. And if you exchange the queens, it doesn't matter how many pawns you take in the process. My rook comes to d2 and I start collecting with my extra piece. So it was not happened in the game. After knight takes e6, Fischer played rook h1, a nice intermezzo. First you save the queen g6, and now you are asking questions, right? Your knight here is hanging. You cannot really go back here because it is attacked. You does not get anything by going to b3 square. You do not want to go to b3. You want to keep pushing. You want to keep attacking, right? And if you take knight takes b7, which is the best move recommended by the engine, but okay, black knight comes to e5. You can get the rook, but black get the harmony which they need. But Fischer played a very interesting move again, rook to h4, with the idea of rook to g4, pinning the queen. So let's say knight takes e5, rook g4. And the crazy part about this entire exchange is after black is still better after knight e5. And this is completely winning for black. This two knight combining with the rook and extra pawn is actually just winning. But okay, why would you give up a queen when you are just, you can save it, right? Knight to e5, good move. Again, by black. And again a counter-attacking move by Fischer, bishop to e4. You cannot really give black move to just rest, otherwise the black piece, extra piece, will just win. So bishop to e4, very nice idea, attacking the s7 pawn and the queen. Pawn to f5 has to be played, and there comes another energetic move, rook a to h1, attacking the s7 pawn. But this is a bluff actually. You can actually capture any piece you like, but you have to calculate little bit deeper. So, well, Nash have shown that he is more than capable of calculating more, like 2 moves ahead, and he just captured the knight. That's a free piece. You can even capture the bishop on e4, but I mean, it's your choice. You can capture anything. And this is the idea Fischer had, rook a6. Still, you can capture knight takes e4 and give up your queen. It is still fine. Black is still completely winning. But of course, why would you do that, right? Queen to g4. And this is, after queen to g4, this is the idea Fischer had, f3. Now, move your queen away so I can capture the pawn on s7, capture the knight pawn on f5, try to, blast open the king side, hope for the best. But, well, there is a very simple idea which Fischer missed here, which simplifies the game. And, once the queens are off the board, it is just piece of cake, right, for black to win this position. So pause the video and try to find the easiest way to win in this position for black while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay. Well, the nicest way to finish this position is knight takes e4, which was played in the game. You sacrifice the queen, which is temporary, but you do. And after f takes g4, you play rook d2 and you recover your queen because of the pin. So Fischer, well, has nothing more to do. You have to capture the rook, and you can resign here. Rook is no chance against 2 knights and bishop, but Fischer continued, rook s7. There's an attack on the bishop, bishop g7, and you capture another pawn. So Fischer got 1 pawn and a rook against 2 knight and a bishop. So black is effectively still a full 3-point up, right? The problem part about this particular position is the rooks are not doing much on the h file because of that bishop on g7. So black just continued rook f8. So black wants to claim the pawn. So white defended it, but you cannot really defend everything. So knight to c4 with a double attack on the pawn on b2, and there is a hidden threat of knight e3 check. But you have to defend the pawn on b2. So b3 and knight e3 check, which just wins the pawn. King to f2 was played, and a few moves has been played. You can resign here after knight takes f5. There is just nothing to do here. But Fischer continued playing. g4 gives up another pawn. Knight takes g4 just to play, for stalemating ideas. And king to e2. And who knows, your opponent may fall for it. You can play rook f2, but black plays bishop takes c3. Why not? Capture another pawn. Rook to c5, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn, bishop b4, rook c7, and now rook f2 check. And now all black pieces are, well, working together. King to d3. Now you can play rook d2 check, but black played rook takes a2 simply. You just swipe up all the pawns. And rook to g1, because there was the threat of knight to f2 check, winning the rook, right? So rook to g1, pinning the knight. Now comes b6, just, taking their sweet time, defending everything. King to e4, white has to try something. And there comes rook g2. There is many ways you can win this position. Rook g2 is a very nice one. Rook takes, knight takes. There is no other moves you can play here. You have to exchange the rooks. Rook king f5, again, you have to go for a counter play. There is no other way you can, you cannot hope anything else. You can only hope that black will blunder a checkmate or something. But black did it. Knight to e3 check. King to g6. And be careful, rook c8 is a checkmating threat. But black played a very nice series of moves. Knight f4 check. King s6. Knight f5 check. And it was in this position at move number 51 that Fischer finally resigned the game. And what a win for Nash and Mund, because, well, first of all, there is no other moves than king g5, and there comes knight e6 check, which forked the king and the rook. So that would be a nice finish. But Fischer resigned, and as we can see that Fischer is still not at his prime, but wait for one more year, because at 14, at the age of 14, Fischer actually played his famous immortal game, which was the game of the century against Donald Bryan. So let's see what happened in this tournament or in this year. What inspired Fischer to change so much in a single year? And this is the exciting part, right? Anyways, that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, then give it a like, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.